Hello, my name is Angus Simpson, and this is the story of Glasgow through the ages. I'm standing on a balcony at the south front of Glasgow University. Established in 1451, it's the fourth oldest institution of its kind in Britain. The university was established when Glasgow's reputation was as an important religious centre, rather than the industrial city that it was to become. It was established, like its predecessors Oxford, Cambridge and St Andrews, by monks. Originally built in the centre of the city, it moved here to Gilmore Hill in the West End in 1870. Some of the greatest names of Scottish culture and science have passed through its gates: Adam Smith, James Watt and Lord Kelvin. Lord Kelvin, or plain William Thomson as he was then, entered the university in 1834, aged 10. His achievements are too numerous to mention them all. He developed the absolute temperature scale, called the Kelvin scale, and he pioneered the electric telegraph between Britain and the USA. He also invented an improved naval compass and even a tide predictor. No wonder his name is everywhere. The Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum, like its near neighbour the university, was conceived on a grand scale. Its many galleries are arranged around two naturally lit halls, either side of the Great Hall itself. The enormous Lewis pipe organ is still used for recitals to this day. Like so much in Glasgow, it was an exhibition, this time in 1888, attended by Queen Victoria and more than 6 million of her subjects, that enabled the construction of this building. Whilst the contents were largely the collection of a private individual, Archibald MacLellan. It remains Scotland's most popular gallery, famous for its collection of 17th century Dutch and Impressionist paintings, as well as its many sculptures and a world-class collection of silver and ceramics. There are three great buildings surrounding Kelvin Grove Park. There's the University on Gilmore Hill, the Art Gallery and Museum, and there's also the Kelvin Hall. If the Kelvin Grove is a palace of the arts, then the Kelvin Hall is a palace to Glasgow's other obsession, industry. Built in 1927, it was the foremost exhibition centre in the city, and Princess Elizabeth, as she then was, came to Glasgow to help kick-start Glasgow's industrial regeneration after the devastation of the Second World War.
My Lord Provost, ladies and gentlemen, as a lover of Scotland, where I always meet so many good friends, I am delighted that this famous city has been chosen to house that section of the Festival of Britain which tells the story of industrial power.
Glasgow has benefited from many exhibitions in its past. They've often come at a time when the city's been in trouble, such as after the war or during the Depression of the 1930s. Times when the city needed to persuade the rest of the world to believe in it, and when it had to be reminded to believe in itself.
The end of the Empire exhibition. Scotland's greatest enterprise comes to a triumphant conclusion. Crowds file into pavilions for a last look, searchlights pick out aeroplanes in the sky, and fountains shoot their spray upward in a jubilant display as if to prove that the exhibition has been a great success, as indeed it has. There's been a small loss sustained by backers, but attendances have exceeded the estimate. Scotland has gained not only in commercial benefits, but in prestige.
It happened again in the 1980s. The city was searching for a new identity after the decline of the heavy industries, and huge swathes of land, especially along the Clyde, lay unoccupied. A garden festival was devised to regenerate the area. It was mocked initially, as outsiders couldn't understand what the no-mean city of popular legend had to do with gardens. But it was a great success for the city and brought a new tide of investment into the area. As with the future Queen Elizabeth at the Kelvin Hall, the royal family have often tried to influence events in Glasgow when crisis has threatened.
The Night Scot draws into Glasgow Central 5 minutes ahead of time, and from its steps the Prince of Wales, who is greeted by Lord Weir, his host during the tour, Lord Elgin, and the Lord Provost. His Royal Highness is continuing his role of social investigator. It is his firm determination to do all that lies in his power to improve conditions in the distressed areas all over the country. His Royal Highness proceeds to the Killamont allotments and gets a big welcome. The Prince was particularly interested in this agricultural scheme, for the ground is being developed by unemployed who had no previous experience of tilling the soil. The keenness with which they have seized this opportunity for productive work is evidence of their deep-rooted desire to turn their hands to anything, provided they are given the chance.
After Edward VIII's abdication, his brother Bertie assumed the crown, and he and the Queen became regular visitors to Glasgow during the war, a time when German bombers had identified Clydeside as one of their primary targets, housing, as it did, an enormous percentage of Britain's industrial strength. It meant that surrounding residential areas, such as Govan, were also devastated. Away from the Clyde, back in the west end of the city, there are areas untouched by the bombs. They just had to contend with the overzealous town planners of the 1960s and 70s. Across Kelvin Grove Park, from the university, sits Park Circus. This is a precious pocket of Glasgow that survived the town planners of the 1960s and 70s just. They were designed by Charles Wilson as private housing for the middle classes in the Victorian era. They are without doubt his masterpiece. It remains as a grand statement of Glasgow's wealth from an era when it was the second city of the empire and proud to call itself the workshop of the world. When King George was visiting the Clyde after World War I, Glasgow was a powerhouse. The coal from the Lanarkshire mines fueled it, and the river meant that it could distribute its products to all the corners of the empire.
For an island people, it is often true that the condition of its shipbuilding industry is the measure of its national prosperity. So the flood tide of business on the Clyde is a welcome omen for the affairs of Britain in 1937. In Glasgow, the signs of the times are clear. More money is in circulation, the shops are full of buyers. From the shipyards come thousands of men with money in their pockets, some to be spent, some to be put carefully away in bank or post office. And if there's one sign that is usually connected with poverty, remember that it is also the sign of pledges redeemed. For these portents of prosperity, Glasgow may thank the river. A trip down the Clyde affords the truest evidence. At every yard, in place of emptiness and silence, are ships being built to the cheerful sound of riveting. Symbolizing the activity of Clydebank is the Queen Mary's sister ship, the Cunard White Star liner number 552. For her alone, brigades of workers are marshalled in the great march back to prosperity. So while the work continues, completed vessels steam away to become the argosies of 1937.
Arriving on Clydeside, the Queen had a great reception from the many thousands present.
Indeed, the prosperity lasted into the reign of the present monarch, to whom at one time the launching of great ships on the Clyde was a regular duty.
Then Her Majesty performed the ceremony.
I name this ship Empress of Britain. May God speed her and all who sail in her.
The 24,000-ton Canadian Pacific liner, bearer of a famous name, will carry 1,000 passengers on her transatlantic trips planned to begin next spring.
A downturn in the fortunes of the city was closer than anyone realised. It wasn't just a Glaswegian problem, it was Britain's.
It was a great day for Glasgow.
Behind me, as I stand in the Park District of the West End, stands a symbol of the industrial might of the city, the Finnieston Crane. It sits idly by the Clyde now, towering over the river that once brought Glasgow so much of its wealth. The decline of shipbuilding throughout the 20th century meant the city was plunged into crisis.
Shipbuilding is one of our biggest industries and one on which much of our prestige depends. So the future of shipbuilding concerns not only its 250,000 employees, it's of importance to us all. At the moment, this future is unpromising, to say the least. Production is going down. We're losing trade to competitors overseas, to Japan, Germany and Sweden. One shipyard in particular symbolises the dilemma facing the industry, Fairfields of Glasgow. To rescue it from bankruptcy, the government stepped in to buy and run it as a partnership between public and private ownership. It needs $5.5 million to keep going, half from the government, the rest from private enterprise and possibly from the trades unions. The reaction of Fairfield's workers isn't shared by all shipbuilding employers. They consider it puts Fairfields in a privileged position. But what alternative is there? Does the answer lie in amalgamating Britain's 4 yards into a small number of groups? This proposal may be presented as one solution in a forthcoming report on the industry. Amalgamation on a regional basis could cut costs and speed delivery. Delivery delays have been a major reason for shipping companies sending their orders elsewhere. This is the Priam, first of a new class of cargo liners built for the Blue Funnel line. Her launching at Vickers Newcastle Yard was scheduled for December. It took place 4 weeks late. A small delay, but enough for a director of the group to threaten to place some future orders with Japan. With their specially designed bows, Priam and her 3 sister ships will make over 20 knots fully laden. The design of the 3 main holds amidships simplifies a speedy turnaround. The engines and the crew's quarters are situated right aft. In fact, a combination of efficiency and comfort is typical of the quality that British shipbuilders can still produce. The majority of the crew are quartered in single-berth cabins with air conditioning and virtually passenger liner comfort. So a new high-speed cargo liner takes to the water. But quality is wasted if orders aren't fulfilled on time. Everybody knows that Britain builds the finest ships in the world, but too many people are discovering that too many of them are built too expensively or delivered too late. In Glasgow, outside the city chambers, the biggest demonstration in the city's history took place recently. 6,000 Upper Clyde shipbuilding employees are threatened with redundancy, and this with the already high figure of more than 9 million unemployed throughout Britain.
Industry in the west of Scotland came to a halt during the day as a further demonstration of workers' sympathy. After gathering at Glasgow Green, the demonstrators listened to speeches from senior shop steward Jim Reid. Now comes news that the government are pressing ahead with the creation of a new framework to maintain shipbuilding on the Upper Clyde. A queen who has just celebrated her first birthday afloat.
It was the launch of the QE2 in 1968 that, in hindsight, many have seen as the swan song for Clydeside. This colossal liner was the last of the great ships to be wholly built and launched in Glasgow.
Less than 3 months to go to clothe her complexity in paint and plastics and furnishings. But the huge heartbeat of her powerhouse, the network of her nervous system, is virtually complete and ready to go. When you put £30 million in one basket, safety is a priority. The safety control room is electronically linked with every part of the ship. For more than 2,000 passengers, more deck space than any other liner. Soon the army of worker ants will leave this gigantic anthill for the last time. "58,000 tons of superlatives under the command of Captain Bill Warwick. Timely symbolism before getting steam up in earnest.
As the city lurched from one crisis to another, social problems inevitably followed, and Glasgow became synonymous with political militancy.
In the city of Glasgow, the first days of the social contract bring an unofficial bus strike which set thousands of people walking to work. Glasgow Central Station was swamped by queues of commuters 300 yards long. And every taxi in the city and for 12 miles around was fully booked for the morning rush hour. Traffic jams with a reported 300% increase in traffic throughout the city. With the strike of refuse collectors, domestic rubbish piles up in plastic bags or rots in the streets, an estimated 30,000 tons of it. The City Health Department warns of the increasing danger of a plague of rats. The strike of sewage workers has crippled the city's disposal system. The sludge ship Dalmarnock, which normally disposes of 500 tanker loads per week, now lying idle. Thousands of gallons of untreated sewage pour into the Clyde, but the strikers deny breaking the social contract.
This is a city that's experienced enormous highs as the driving force of the Industrial Revolution and as the workshop for the British Empire. But it's also felt the agony of economic depression. Glasgow became a byword for urban deprivation.
New flats for old in the Gorbals, Glasgow's most infamous relic of the Industrial Revolution. In the 1890s, refugees from the Irish countryside and the barren Scottish Highlands fled to this mecca of mushrooming heavy industry and shipbuilding. In an age when the only requirement for workers' housing was that it should be as near as possible to their place of work, the Gorbals crowded 500 people to the acre. The history of those rat-infested slums reads like a tale by Edgar Allan Poe. The new houses and flats allow for a mere 150 to the acre, with social amenities that in Grandma's day were no more than the dreams of a street corner socialist. The young, of course, will take it all for granted. Grandma, a child of darkness, might shrink from the light, wide-open spaces of perimeter estates and new towns, but time marches on regardless, and even the most ardent conservationists must finally give way to the demands of the future.
Of course, many of these replacements for the old tenements proved largely unsuccessful. These flats in Springburn were once the highest in Europe. An ambitious idea indeed, but one which substituted disease and overcrowding for isolation and vandalism. To paraphrase the Prince of Wales 50 years earlier, something had to be done. So, in the mid-1980s, Glasgow bravely rebranded itself. It proclaimed itself famously to be miles better, cocking a snook perhaps at its greatest rival, Edinburgh. It also realised that it had a heritage worth preserving, as well as a future worth having.
Now, ladies, in you go. Hope you got this first time. Now, we've come up with this idea of putting this taxi in the road. Remember, this is history. There has never been a taxi in Glasgow that's been any other colour than black. So this is history. So it serves two functions, you know. It changes the whole image of taxis in Glasgow, if you like, and it's carrying the message of Glasgow smiles better. I think the rest of the world's beginning to sit up and realise that Glasgow smiles better.
It took some years, but after the shock of the decline of the heavy industries, Glasgow began to find its old confidence again. The city and its people found a new way forward. In 1990, Glasgow was designated European City of Culture. Old masters such as Charles Rennie Mackintosh and Alexander Greek Thomson were rediscovered and their work given the praise it deserved. Alexander Greek Thomson had never visited Greece, but he used it for the inspiration behind his churches, such as here in St. Vincent Street. Like the Parthenon, it rises up from a hill, but unlike the Parthenon, it's been swamped by the modern development surrounding it. It's hard to believe seeing it in its present state, but this is one of the great buildings of Scotland. As well as the city itself, the world had taken a fresh look at Glasgow. Glaswegians realised that its future lay in its reputation for design, architecture, art and fashion. New business and with it new investment followed, attracted to this always vibrant but now fashionable city. It was the work of that one-off genius Charles Rennie Mackintosh that helped to make Glasgow fashionable once again.
When it was built in 1896, the Glasgow School of Art was acclaimed as a revolution in design. But the story here isn't the building, it's the work being done there. Glasgow is renowned throughout the country for its Department of Textile Design. In fact, the printed textiles created by the students at the school are bold, imaginative, and as fresh as the pigments they're printed in. Inspiration behind the success is Robert Stewart, head of the department. He makes every student design a smock to wear at the school and teaches them silkscreen printing, transferring the design onto the fabric. From here, students go on to more elaborate designs for more elaborate garments. But the simple smock is the first stage, and it's often the most effective. After designing them, the students wear them. Everyone his own one-man exhibition. And even if you don't earn a diploma, you can always give yourself a medal.
It's a building of two parts. The first wing was built between 1897 and 1899, but it's the western extension built in 1909 that is his masterwork. The library soars up from its steep hillside site. The walls are sheer like great cliffs, interrupted only by the dramatic windows in 3 tiers. Typically with Mackintosh, the interiors and exteriors reflect each other, and every detail is part of an integrated whole. The lampshades and even the clock are all personally designed by the architect. It still serves its function, of course, as one of the foremost schools of art in the country. From having been seen as a dangerous radical in his own time, he was now a hero, and the School of Art recognised as one of the greatest architectural achievements of the 20th century. Having seen the grand gestures of this amazing building, inspired as it was by Scottish castles and hill houses, it comes as a surprise to find that Mackintosh was just as adept at creating interiors for the family home. This is a complete reconstruction at the Hunterian Art Gallery within the University of Mackintosh's own house, number 6 Florentine Terrace, where he lived from 1906 to 1914. As with the School of Art, the whole design is completely integrated, not only through the architectural skill of Mackintosh, but also through the artistic talents of his partner, Margaret MacDonald. With today's taste for stark lines, simple colours and minimalist furniture, these designs don't look out of place 100 years later. It's hard to imagine just how revolutionary this all was in an era of bearskin rugs, chintz, leather and taffeta. Admired in Europe, he was a prophet without honour in his own country. Unable to get commissions, he eventually left to paint watercolours in the south of France. But great buildings in Glasgow didn't just begin with Mackintosh. They've existed for centuries. Across town, close to its eastern boundary, lies Glasgow Cathedral.
A ceremony in Glasgow Cathedral was one important engagement for the Queen Mother during her visit to the city. She was to unveil a memorial window to the officers and men of Scottish divisions who fell in 2 world wars. The window had been designed and made by Mr. Gordon Webster, a splendid composition to commemorate those who died in their country's service. And now the cord is pulled and the window revealed in all its magnificence. The figures of St. Michael and St. Andrew are flanked on either side by the battle honours of the 4 divisions. It had been a moving occasion for Her Majesty and the vast congregation, this dedication of a memorial to Scotland's great sacrifice.
It was built on the site of the Chapel of St. Mungo, a 6th century bishop of Strathclyde and the patron saint of the city. Legend has it that Mungo placed the body of a holy man on a cart yoked to 2 bulls, and in whatever dear green place that it stopped would be where he would build his church. The crypt contains his tomb. During the Reformation of the 16th century, when Catholicism was purged and Protestantism became the main religion of Scotland, Glasgow Cathedral did the same and adapted itself to Protestant worship. Consequently, it was spared destruction and remains a rare example of an almost complete 13th century church. Behind it sits the necropolis, an extravagant graveyard modelled on Père Lachaise in Paris, and last resting place of the great and good of the city during the boom times of the Empire. It's like a town in miniature, and one of the most astonishing places in the whole of the city. And over everyone looms the stern face of Protestant reformer John Knox, perched on his Doric pillar. There's also burial mounds in Pollock Park, the last resting place of the first ever Glaswegians from before the birth of Christ, but today it houses the Burrell Collection, another example of private generosity and public funds. Sir William Burrell, a wealthy shipping magnate, gave his extraordinary art collection to the city in 1944. A building to house it was finally completed in 1983. The collection ranges from the classical sculpture of the Warwick vase to bronzes by Rodin. This 14th century arch is taken from a castle in Yorkshire. Walk through it and you'll find pieces from all over the world in a setting where it's hard to tell where the gallery finishes and the woodland begins. The Burrell collection is a relatively modern addition to the city, the jewel in the crown of the city's renaissance in the 1980s. And of course there have been many changes to the shape and character of Glasgow over the last 100 years. But it's hard to imagine the time when Rangers and Celtic weren't fighting it out for the crown of undisputed kings of Scottish football. This is Ibrox, home of Glasgow Rangers, who in recent years have been the preeminent club in Glasgow and indeed Scotland. Their trophy room is full to bursting, and they are the current holders of both the league title and the Scottish Cup. Drama and tragedy, elation and dejection have always attended matches between the old firm.
Here are the teams, Glasgow Rangers and Dark Shirts playing on their own ground. John Thompson, Scottish international goalkeeper, is among the Celtic team who play in striped shirts.
Kick-off at Hampden Park, and Rangers in dark shirts all out to defeat Celtic in the Scottish Cup semi-final replay. First blood to Rangers from a free kick. Wilson put it in. Then Celtic, who were up against sun and wind as well as Rangers, equalised through Mocken. Level pegging at half-time, but 4 minutes after the changeover, Miller took a Scott pass to put Rangers ahead. Another Scott cross kick gave Wilson his chance to head home number 3. Ranger fans just about went crazy when Miller headed number 4.
Tiger especially was kept on the jump.
Successful at home, Rangers have sometimes been thwarted when playing foreign opposition.
Nearing the end, however, Rangers scored from a penalty to make it 2-2.
The European Cup has so far eluded their grasp.
But
Dynamos remain unbeaten.
Lisbon.
The same cannot be said of their greatest rivals, however.
If any British team could win this coveted trophy, it had to be Celtic. Inter Milan kicked off, and in a continental near heatwave, maybe the odds were a shade against Celtic. And a fat lot the Scottish heroes and their 15,000 supporters cared about that. Attack is the policy that's won the Glasgow Idols everything this year, except the English Cup, for which they weren't qualified to compete. An early Inter Milan attack found Simpson on the alert. Celtic counter-attacked, coming within an ace of taking the lead. Inter Milan looked really dangerous here. Capellini was brought down by Craig, a penalty. With the spot kick, Mazzola made no mistake. This was where Celtic showed the all-round attacking greatness that made them invincible this season on every big occasion. Second half, Celtic still a goal down in spite of having had 90% of the game so far. They continued piling on the pressure, believing the reward must come before long. The Italians had the luck of old Harry this time. Then fullback Tommy Gemmell shot from 25 yards out. Gemmell's brilliant goal didn't put new heart into Celtic. The old one was good enough to beat anybody. And how their supporters thanked their stars they'd come to Lisbon. But somehow, Inter's defence held firm. Barely 7 minutes from time came the winning goal. Chalmers deflected Murdoch's shot past Sati. That was how Celtic became the first ever British team to win the European Cup. Billy McNeil and his magnificent men earned the thanks and admiration of their native Glasgow, Scotland, and the whole United Kingdom. Glasgow. Back home it was cheers all the way along the 11-mile drive to Celtic Park. Celtic had come home. At their own stadium, more than 50,000 jubilant fans were in the stands and on the terraces where they have so often seen their heroes triumph. The European Cup was here to take its place with all the other trophies Celtic have won.
At the City Chambers, Glasgow's Lord Provost, John Johnson, presides at a notable football occasion, the presentation of a plaque to Glasgow Celtic to commemorate their triumph in the European Cup. Celtic's chairman, Bob Kelly, was there too, of course, along with Tom Reed, secretary of the Scottish FA, and the manager and members of the victorious team. In fact, the Lord Provost himself suggested some ideas for the award, which were incorporated in the finished work. It's a wooden targe or shield inscribed in silver with Glasgow's coat of arms and the crest of Celtic. May we add our congratulations once again on this superlative European success.
First we go to Hampden Park, where the old firms Celtic and Rangers were meeting once again in the Scottish Cup final. They've been battling now for 75 years, and each have won the Cup 19 times. Rangers kick off.
Celtic appeared to be unbeatable.
Their reputation as international top liners. Since Jock Stein became their manager 4 years ago, they've won 10 major honours. And in less than 2 minutes, Celtic are 1 up, thanks to Billy McNeil. Inevitably, at these Celtic Rangers encounters, feelings run pretty high. Both teams were already below strength due to injuries. Everything indicated further victims today. It took Celtic the remainder of the half to show which way the cookie was to crumble, and how it crumbled when it came. A minute to the interval, Bobby Lennox scored the second. There was barely time for Martin to recover before he was beaten by the third goal from Connolly. We all know how McKinnon feels. After the interval, Rangers quickly showed that what they may lack in skill, they make up in sheer blockbusting perseverance. But small compensation for those defensive blunders. There's a spirit of rivalry between these two teams that exceeds the usual conventions of sport. It's a power game that splits Scotland's largest city, played out on the terraces as readily as on the field. When Chalmers scored Celtic's fourth goal, all hell broke loose.
Then in 1970 came the Ibrox disaster.
66 spectators, many of them children, lost their lives when these safety barriers gave way. An equalising goal in the last seconds of the game between Celtic and Rangers caused the crowding which led to the tragedy. 165 survivors are in hospital. The official inquiry could lead to much tighter safety regulations at all Britain's football grounds.
Today we've seen the best and most positive as the final whistle goes. Celtic, having won just 10 in the last 22 finals in the League Cup, improved that record considerably, and there's one in a man.
This is Hampden, the national stadium. It's seen Rangers and Celtic players united in the face of the common enemy, England.
Hampden Park and the skirl of the pipes as an accompaniment to the international soccer match. But were the pipes too much for some of the Sassenachs present? Shaw spins the coin, and Mercer calls wrong. Perhaps that was an omen. At any rate, this was the match in which Scotland were destined to make their great comeback after years of defeat by England. England were within inches of scoring on several occasions, but Scotland, especially their new centre-half, the giant Frank Brennan, number 5, not only kept them out, but pressed very hard themselves. There was no score in the first half. About 135,000 people were there to watch, not a record, but a very big crowd, whose cheering could almost be heard at Murrayfield, where the Scots were beating the English at Rugger. Here at Hampden, the English goalie Swift was having a very tough time, but he played a magnificent game. Swift was only beaten a few seconds from the end when from a free kick the ball came in to Waddle and Delaney, who netted. A well-deserved Scottish victory, I thought, and the crowd evidently thought so too.
Glasgow has produced many other sporting heroes, but none perhaps greater than boxer Benny Lynch, an undisputed champion of the world.
Park, Glasgow is the battleground. But first, Victor McLaglen, tough guy of the screen, takes a bow. Also Tommy Farr, who's done a bit of scrapping himself. Then battle commences, and Peter Kane is promptly socked by champion Benny Lynch. But the Liverpool lad, if you don't know him by now, you can tell him by the stripe on his shorts, gets a bit of his own back and gamely carries the fight to the Scottish holder of the flyweight titles of Britain, Europe and the world. These titles are at stake tonight. It's a night of rain, which even gets into the ring and makes the board slippery. But the fireworks provided by the boxers amply compensate the crowd, who witness one of the fastest and most thrilling fights for years. Kane is only 19, Lynch 5 years older. The experience of the champion stands him in good stead, and having cleverly fought his way through the whirlwind tactics of his opponent, he reaches the 12th round, complete master of the situation. From now on, it's a slaughter. Benny just hits Peter hard and keeps on hitting. With wonderful pluck, Kane refuses to go down for more than a second and contrives to survive the round, though out on his feet. Then the 13th and last round. The champion goes for the kill. You'd think Peter had had enough by now, but after a count of 7, he tries to carry on the fight. It's impossible, of course, and this is the end, except that Lynch retains his titles and Kane his reputation as the bravest of scrappers. The moment the fight's over, half Glasgow tries to inspect the pitch, and the champion has a second fight on his hands as soon as he's finished the first. But once again, he comes out on top.
Scotland would have to wait until the 1970s before it produced another world champion.
Well done! Let's try to get some. Good, great.
Keep moving, James.
Determination seems to be leaking out of Pitalua. Tries to fight back. Round 12. And McCanty's moving in, and he's stopped it. No, he hasn't. I thought he'd stopped it, but no, he's pulled him out into the centre. A moment when Scotland thought they had a world champion. And McCanty moves in again, and this time it is the finish. It's over. Round 12, and the Loyalist camp have done it again. Their second world champion in 44 days. They've done the double. Maurice Hope and now Jim Watt, and Scotland have a world lightweight champion. What a night. And believe me, there are 10,000 people advancing on this ring, and the police are backing up and lining up against the ropes. Such scenes we haven't seen in Britain for a very long time. A marvellous night for Scottish and British sport.
In 1999, as the second millennium drew to a close, Glasgow's journey back from the brink was complete, as the city was awarded the accolade of European City of Architecture and Design.
Neither architecture nor design influenced Glasgow's choice of venue for last night's knees up. The trembling bid team had gathered on home ground, bracing themselves for the news. 50 miles east, and equally nervous, was the team from rival contestant Edinburgh. But all thoughts were on the award ceremony in London.
The winner is... What do I do? Open this? Yes.
Where it was almost time for the judge's decision to be announced.
Glasgow!
In Edinburgh, the Lord Provost was gracious in defeat.
Hello, Jane. Really? Oh, well, give our best wishes to Glasgow then. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for letting me know.
At every turn, it's reinvented itself anew, and the credit for that lies with the generations of people who've lived in this unique city.